So I got this question and I thought I would jump in with a quick bonus episode. So a follower wrote, a member in my fan group for a famous rock star on Facebook is posting to members that he's starting a same star themed podcast very soon. He's asking group members to submit MP3s of themselves playing this rock star's songs for him to use on the podcast. And he seems far less concerned than I am about copyright. I'm assuming he still needs permission from the music publisher or whomever to use even other people's playing these copyrighted songs. Am I correct? Is there a web page anywhere stating this specifically that I could show him? I can only find more generically phrased text that implies that you're using the artist's song versus someone else playing the artist's song. So I'm going to give my answer. I'm not aware of any particular web page other than to read the actual copyright law at 17 USC section 101 through however many sections there are. There's hundreds of sections. So, but I'm going to give you my answer. All right. Hello there. Welcome back. This is a special bonus episode of Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. And today we're diving into a topic that is pretty hot among podcast creators. Everybody wants to use music. So this issue came up. Can you use your own or your friends' cover recordings of famous songs in your podcast? And I'm going to break it down. So first off, we should talk about what exactly is a cover recording. Simply put, it is your own rendition or performance of someone else's song, a fresh take on a classic hit musical composition or something like that. But as you might guess, there's a bit more to it when we start to talk about the legal side. Copyright law is what's involved here, and it protects songs in two main ways. First off, there's the composition itself. That's the music and the lyrics, the work of the songwriter, and it's usually controlled by a music publishing company. That's one copyright. Then there's also the recording that embodies that copyright, that composition. And if you want to use that in your podcast, well, you would need to deal with the record company or the owner of that recording. But to use a cover in a podcast, then you still need to be thoughtful about this. So listen, if you're making your own recordings, then you own those copyrights in the recordings, and you don't need a license for the master. And if you're using other people's cover recordings, you do need their permission, but that should be pretty easy to do in the scenario that we're discussing. So what makes a cover song legal in the first place? Well, essentially, the copyright law says you need permission anytime you make copies or distribute copies or make derivative works or perform or display a work that's covered by copyright in public. And most original work is covered by copyright for life of the author plus 70 years or more. So figure if it's 100 years old or older, then maybe you don't need any permission. But for this rock artist, absolutely covered by copyright. And so what this means is you need permission. But the law actually has a carve out for these cover recordings. It's called a compulsory license. The owner of the copyright cannot say no as long as you pay the royalties. But what that does is it grants you the right to record and distribute your recording of the song. That's a special provision, makes it possible for anyone to do it as long as the composition has previously been recorded and released with the permission of the owner, and as long as you pay the royalties laid out under the law. The law says it's, I think, 10.1 cents currently per copy sold. But the thing is, this compulsory license for mechanical reproduction, as it's called, only applies to the sale of records or downloads embodying the composition. It's that cents per copy sold issue. The thing is, if you're a podcaster and you want to pair that music with the other material you include in your podcast, your speaking and your discussion and your interviews and all that, you are entering a different territory. You need what's called a synchronization license. Even if it's just audio, sync licenses are a different ballgame, and they require a direct negotiation with the publisher or other rights holders for the copyrighted work. And then there's also the public performance license. That's the stuff that's usually handled by radio stations with radio under so-called blanket licenses from ASCAP or BMI here in the US, or in Canada, the organization is called SOCAN. In the UK, it's PRS. And there are other companies like these performing rights organization, PROs, in other countries. But the thing is, these organizations only control a small part of the permission pie, and you would still need that privately negotiated sync license. And since the rights holders for the compositions can grant you the performance rights directly, well, you don't really gain much by going through those performing rights organizations for that, since you could do it all in one fell swoop and not have to pay royalties on an ongoing basis for that. So how do you navigate this as a podcaster? Well, a few choices, and one possible sort of exception that I'll tell you a little bit about. First off, consider obtaining the necessary licenses. Figure out who owns the composition copyrights in question. Contact them and get the permissions that you need. This will probably take some time, and it will likely involve some cost, so be prepared for that. And the other alternatives are using royalty-free music or creating your own compositions. But if you're doing a fan-oriented show about an artist, that may not work. And that exception that I mentioned might just be the help here. It's called fair use, and it's really the subject for another video or several other videos. You can check out my explainer linked in the description or the show notes for this episode. It's firemark.com/fair use. But the short version is, if you're using the cover recordings to do criticism or commentary about the original composition, or the artist, I suppose, or you're using it as a teaching tool and you're only using short snippets of the material, you're not taking the whole thing, well, then you might be in this fair use territory. You're going to want to get a lawyer's formal opinion on this before you start posting. You don't want to get a bunch of takedowns and copyright strikes and maybe even have your podcast or your channel banned from the platforms. So here's the bottom line. Using cover songs can add a lot of value and engagement to your podcast, but it's crucial that you proceed with real caution. Make sure you're clear on the rights involved and seek professional advice if you're unsure. And remember, it's all about respecting the original creators while bringing something new to the table. So that wraps up this quick bonus episode. I hope it sheds some light on using cover records in your podcast. And as always, I'll say thank you for listening. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. Don't forget to subscribe and share and leave us some feedback. And stay tuned for our next episode. And until then, keep creating, keep innovating, but most importantly, keep it legal. Thanks. So I've got a comment from a Facebook user. The new Elvis Act about AI in music is interesting. Tennessee governor has signed legislation designed to protect all music industry professionals against the potential misuse of AI. I'm wondering if this could eventually seep into the podcasting world when it comes to, absolutely. Facebook user, yes, this will be an issue. In fact, I'm going to be talking about the Elvis Act on the next episode of my my flagship podcast, Entertainment Law Update. That will come out in late April. We got the word about the Elvis Act just the day we were recording our most recent episode. And yeah, the phrase music industry professionals is interesting. What would make someone a professional in the industry? Usually that has some tie to making money, or at least intending to make money from performance, or working for established companies. And that's the problem with legislation in these situations, is why should we protect professionals but not amateurs? What about citizens who are doing their thing but don't expect it to be the way they make their living? And after all, most musicians don't make their living with their music. They're maybe it's a side hustle or something like that. But you want to make it a living. That's a tall order, high bar to jump over. So yeah, the Elvis Act is more about the AI recreation of voices, and it's similar in its nature, I think, to what we call a right of publicity law, or a misappropriation of name and likeness, or in this case, the sound of the voice. Here in California, we have a misappropriation statute, a right of publicity statute that addresses voice sound alikes and things like that. And I think an AI would violate it the same as an individual or a company would violate it. So that's a thing. But yeah, good question, and thank you for presenting it here. Look for a discussion of it in a future episode, and thanks for being with me. Take care.